Welcome back to the mini lecture series Best Practices in Managing Information Technology. Today, we shall be discussing how to cut over projects into operations. Now, what is cut over? As we all know, IT projects develop through a time. At the end of that period, they go live and subsequently they're turned over to operations. In fact, cutover is probably the most critical time and aspect of a project. It is the make or break of a project. Now, why is cutover really so difficult? Because on one hand, you have the project team. Project team is finishing and they want to go home already. They want to finish as fast and turn it over to operations. On the other hand, you have operations who has never touched these new processes, possibly new technologies and new applications, and yet they have to take over at some point. So the interests of both groups are not really aligned. The basic question that has to be answered, and which is what we will answer in the next slide, is who really provides support once the project goes live. It would seem logical that support upon going live is provided by the project team. They're the most familiar with the project, the most familiar with the application, and the most familiar with the processes. However, the difficulty with that, as we all know, is that we become very dependent on the project team. And the operations team, which has to take over at some point, has never really experienced what it means taking over and supporting this project. The danger to that really is that the operations and maintenance team is totally unprepared. So what is the solution? The best solution really is a combination. First level of support ideally should be provided by O&M. And why is that? They have never handled this project precisely because of that. Because they're unfamiliar with how the application works and the processes. This is the moment to learn because upon going live, you will have a lot of issues. The best time to learn is when you're resolving issues. In order to support them, the project team should be assisting them. Ideally, they should be sitting side by side, providing the second level of support. So when O&M doesn't know exactly what to do, the project team guides them and tells them how to resolve. But still, O&M is the one that actually executes. Only if they're not able to does it escalate to the project team. Third level of support, of course, is with the vendor of the product in case it's a bug related to the product itself. Let us also not underestimate the value of service desk. Service desk has a very important function because if issues are raised to service desk and they can resolve, they can be immediately closed without having to further escalate the issue. In order for service desk to do its job, they need to understand how they will reply. That means conducting an FAQ for service desk that tells them exactly in a spiel how they are supposed to react to a customer, an internal customer, or a user calling them with regards to an issue. Now what you see here is really an example of a support matrix. As you can see, as the project goes through the different phases, different teams provide the support. During the project itself, before going live, it's really the project team providing the support, and there's really no involvement by O&M. Upon going live, either O&M takes over the first level of support, or you may give it a specific moratorium time, wherein the project team is still providing first level while O&M learns. Subsequently, not so long after going live, O&M takes over and the project team takes the second level of support. That goes on until the warranty period ends. Upon ending the warranty period, the project team disappears and O&M will still provide first level of support, and it will be the vendor's support mechanism that provides the next level of support for the project. It's also very important that this matrix be very clear from the beginning by both teams. And it's also important that even the mechanism, for example, how tickets are raised and to whom, is also very clear even before you go live. Now, of course, the logical question is how can O&M take over the support of an application that they've never touched? So it's all about preparation. A lot of things have to be done before going live. And this slide shows some of the things that need to be done. First and foremost, the O&M team needs to be trained. And that does not mean only technical training or training on the application, but it also means training on the process itself. The O&M team has to understand why this process is being implemented, the rationale behind it. In that way, it's easier for them to remember on why this configuration was done. A second very important aspect is testing, and there is no substitute for comprehensive testing. User acceptance test means that the users are the ones that really test. And it is the users because it's the users that really understand the process much more than IT. And of course, hand in hand with testing comes end user training. And one of the best practices we've found in training the end users is train the trainers, so that the trainer that is being trained and has to train others is forced to really learn and listen, because he will subsequently be training the other users. Now, what else needs to be done? There's a lot of things that need to be done well in advance to the go live. And as indicated here, some of these things are, for example, backup and recovery. Backup and recovery, everybody says, so there's a backup procedure, there's a recovery procedure. Yes, but O&M has to sign it off, and O&M has to agree that that is the proper backup and recovery procedure. Why? Because subsequently they will be the ones doing it. Another aspect, as you see here, is release management procedures. Every application has its own particular release strategy. It may not be the same. The way you release from development to testing environment to production environment. Every application has its own release management procedures. Every application has its own particular backup and recovery procedures. And last but not least, sometimes you may want to freeze new development. This means that we will put a moratorium on new enhancements being done by O&M while the project goes on. Why may we want to do that? Because some of the enhancements may have a conflict with the project itself. And so in order to avoid that, we say, okay, for the next months until we go live, no enhancements. And that helps a lot, instead of having to find out during testing that there are issues, or worse, during go live itself. What other preparations need to be done for the go live? Some are very difficult, and here's an example of a few very difficult ones. Number one is data migration. And data migration means migrating data from your legacy system to the new application, or from external files into the application itself. There has to be a detailed plan on how it has to be done, and preferably it has to be tested. Sometimes data migration takes a long time, and so you need to find the right time window in order to do that. The second one, as you can see here, is to do a cutover plan. A cutover plan says everything you need to do right before going live and everything you need to do right after. And this does not only entail work from the project team, it entails work from the O&M team, and it entails work usually from the end users. And it has to be very clear that each one has to do its piece of work for this to go successful. Sometimes in some organizations, it's very hard to get the O&M team to partake in this, or even the end users. But sometimes there's just no other way. Related to that, we have cut over of transactions and data quality. And what does that mean? Sometimes when you go from the legacy process to the new process, even if it's the same application, some of the transactions hang. Say, for example, you change the approval process for leaves. Some of the old leave requests in your HR system may just hang because the new process is not the same as the old one. And so you have to understand how those need to be treated. Sometimes it may be as simple as deleting the old requests and asking the users to recreate them again. But again, the end users need to be aware, and you need to inform them, and you need to give them specific procedures on how this has to be done. Typical examples of this also are purchase order approvals, and many of the things that have workflows have a tendency to hang once the new application comes in. Okay, now imagine that you've done everything perfectly according to plan, everything according to the book, and you go live. What now? What do you have to do? Well, the first thing it's important to take note is that there's no such thing as over testing. The more you've tested, the less probability of incidences occurring. And if you've done that properly, most of the incidences that will occur are really procedural, meaning to say it's the users, because of not being accustomed with the new application, do not execute correctly the use of the application. Normally, this would be around 80% if you've done your job right. However, that doesn't mean that these should not be monitored. In fact, all incidences should be monitored at least on a week by week basis to ensure that the number of incidence tickets is going down week per week. Now, this table shows the weekly tickets, and if you look at the 5th week of March, the moment you go live, the number of tickets jump. That's natural and expected. What's important is on a weekly basis, the number of tickets go down. And if they don't go down, that means you have a problem because you're not addressing the root cause. Or if they're not going down fast enough, it's the same thing. Root causes have not been fully addressed. As mentioned before, Service Desk is your best friend upon going live. You want Service Desk to handle all tickets before they're escalated, and therefore, the FAQ that is provided to Service Desk must be comprehensive. It's also important to go back to that FAQ, revisit it, and see what is lacking and to refine it further. Additionally, you need to identify and address those tickets that are escalated, and that means meeting together with the O&M and the project team to see what are the escalated tickets and how to resolve them. Initially, this may need to be done daily, but eventually it may be done on a weekly basis. As a summary, cutover need not be traumatic. It only requires proper planning, proper testing, and a lot of collaboration and discussion between O&M, the project team, and the users before, during, and after go live. And for more information about this topic, please consult my book, available on Springer, online, Google, and Amazon. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.